Okay, one more minute. Okay, so it is 6:05. I will go ahead and get started. If you were able to make it tonight, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys able to make it, and congratulations if you're on this video. You are a 2026 awardee. We are moving forward with the program. Lots of our plants are growing out and everything looks really great. And so I'm really excited to invite you to this webinar. We have a guest speaker tonight, and I'll just do some quick meeting arrangements, but our guest speaker tonight is Dr. Lindsie McCabe with the USDA Bee Lab. And so she has a quick presentation for us tonight too. So, am I gonna advance? All right, okay, there we go. So tonight's agenda, really quick, just so everybody can see what we're working on tonight. We're gonna talk really quickly about the program origins and the summary and goals of the program, the native plant grow-outs for 2026, just to give you guys a brief glimpse of what we're looking at and what to expect in your kits. We're going to talk about site preparation and maintenance, which is probably the most important part of your project, as well as managing your expectations of the plants and your successes and your failures and what that may look like. And then next steps, navigating your website. We have lots of really helpful informational packets and booklets and links and resources for you on our website, and we'll help you navigate that as well. And then we'll talk about plant pickup spots. Plant pickup is in September and October, depending on where you are in the state. So I'll give you a brief rundown of that. And then after this is over, by Friday this week, I will send out a link and everyone can log on to that link and fill out in the survey where you would like to pick up your plants, okay? And then additional resources that are on the website, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Leon is my trusty host today. Thank you so much, Leon, for helping me this evening, and he will field your questions. So when you have questions at any time during this presentation, just when you think about them, go ahead and fill them out. They're going to be in your Q&A section, and they're going to be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're looking at it, there's a question box down there, and you would click on that and ask your questions in the Q&A. It's not in a regular chat format. So you have to go through the Q&A. It's open now, so any questions you have, as you think of them and as you come up with them, feel free to ask me. And then Dr. Lindsie McCabe will also have some Q&A after her presentation. If you have any directly for her, we'll feed those to her after her presentation as well. Okay, so without further ado, our guest presenter goes first, and that's Dr. Lindsie McCabe. She is a research entomologist at the USDA ARS Pollinating Insects Research Lab up in Logan. Her research specifically focuses on studying solitary bees and how environmental change affects bee populations and in turn our ecosystems. Her work is essential to sustainability and food systems and biodiversity. Lindsie, here.
Thank you, Liz.
All right. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing and let you go ahead.
Sorry, this is just going to take a second. All righty. Great. Well, thanks everyone, and congratulations. I was in your shoes just last year. We converted our front yard to pollinator habitat, and it's been really exciting. But today I'm going to talk to you about bees and maybe getting to know the bees in your garden that you might see and why bees are important. So I have a lot of information in here, and put all your questions in the chat. I'm sure I'm not going to get to all of them. So if you've applied for this program, you probably know what a pollinator is. But in essence, we're just moving, pollinators are any organism that moves pollen, the male part of the plant, from one plant to another plant, or from the one part of the plant to another part, depending on what plant you're doing. And lots of different organisms can be pollinators, including bees and butterflies and flies, beetles, ants, even bats and rodents have been shown to have some level of pollination. But when we think about pollinators, the primary pollinator that should come to mind are bees. And this is because bees have really adapted through evolutionary history alongside plants to be both efficient and effective at transferring this pollen, which ultimately leads for the best pollination. And so I'm going to talk about bees today. That's also what I study. Why are bees and pollinators so important? Many of you may already know this. About 2/3 of all crops depend on bee pollination, and about 90% of our wildland plants depend on bee pollination. And generally, we think of this to provide about $18 billion in pollination services annually. And this is really underrepresented because it's hard to quantify an economic gain on like landscapes. But so mostly this is looking at like food production. But regardless of that, it's still a huge amount. And it's still very important that we protect our pollinators and understand why they're important. So several of you have probably seen this before. So several of you have probably seen this graphic before, where what would your grocery store look like without bees? And you have all of your delicious orchard crops gone, all your fruits, except for citrus, they're not bee pollinated. But a lot of our vegetable plants are also gone. And this is because realistically, without bee pollination, we wouldn't have these diverse foods. But this also can be an indirect effect of bees. So when you look at the dairy aisle, you wouldn't necessarily think that dairy would be affected by bees. But there is a special type of bee, the alfalfa leaf cutting bee, that pollinates alfalfa. And it's the primary pollinator of alfalfa seed. And so without this pollination of this alfalfa seed, we wouldn't have alfalfa to grow. And therefore, we wouldn't have yummy food like ice cream. And so even indirectly, bees are responsible for much of our food. And of course, almonds are pollinated by bees. And so you wouldn't have almond milk without bees either. But additionally, we have a vast ecosystem service that bees provide. And so you wouldn't get lush landscapes like this. So all of these pictures were taken in Utah, in the mountains of Utah, and you wouldn't get these lush landscapes without bees. And we wouldn't have the ecosystems that we have without the bees that are co-evolved with the plants to move and transfer the pollen, to do the pollination. So I think I maybe didn't need to convince you that bees are important, but if you were unsure, they are. And bees are super diverse. So they're across the United States, there's 6 families of bees, about 400 described species just within the US. It's estimated that this is an underrepresentation of the bees, and it's likely that there's closer to 5,000 species just within the United States. There's about 1,100 bee species in Utah, and unfortunately, a large majority of these species, distributions and natural histories are really unknown. And so this is just an image that we've had for a while of all the different diverse bees. And many people look at this and they're like, oh, I thought that metallic green one was a wasp, or I thought all bees had to be black and yellow. I didn't know that there were blue bees or red bees or green bees. There's even purple bees. So bees can come in all different shapes and colors. They can be very, very small or very, very big. And Utah is really lucky because we have some of the smallest bees and some of the largest bees that you can find in the United States. And of course, many host associations, the plants that they rely on are also undocumented because we know very little about many of these species. So it's important to create these habitats, but it's also equally important that we know who is where. So just recently, last year, there was a checklist of the bees of Utah where they documented about 1,100 plus bees that were in the US, or sorry, in Utah. And off to the left, you can see this picture where of all the counties in Utah and the proportional number of bees in each county. And what you're seeing is, southern Utah has a huge diversity, and then Cache County has a huge diversity. But this is likely because of sampling effort. So Cache County is where the Bee Lab is. That's where we are, and we have sampled a lot. Southern Utah is also where the Bee Lab has sampled a lot. And so these pockets of diversity may more likely be indications of undersampling. And just to kind of harp on this past year, we published a paper, the survey of the Bear River Mountains, and we added 6 new species to Utah. So not just in this area, but 6 new species that hadn't ever been found in Utah before. And that's just because we sampled a little bit more. So it is, if you are doing this and you're looking at your the pollinators, snap a picture, put it on iNaturalist, especially if you are in counties where they're yellow, because that's where we're likely lacking the most diversity and most information. And if you have some questions about what I mean about putting it on iNaturalist, I'm happy to talk more about that, or you can email me and I can chat more about this. But we do use that data to figure out where deficits are in sampling. So now I just want to kind of go through a couple common species or groups of species that you might see in your backyard, and a little bit about their life cycle and who these bees are. As most of you know, you probably are familiar with the honeybee. So this is Apis mellifera. It's not a native species. It was introduced into the United States for pollination and for honey, and even earlier into the Americas for beeswax. When the Spanish came in and had to have mass, they brought in bees for beeswax. But the honeybees have become a good pollen, or have become a managed pollinator because they're easily transportable. They have these colonies, and they're generalist pollinators, which means that they can really go to very many crops. And even if they are not super effective, they make up what they lack in efficacy, they make up for in sheer numbers. And so we continuously use honeybees as an agricultural commodity, but they aren't native to the United States. We also have bumblebees that are used both agriculturally managed, but also we have 42 out of the 47 species in the US are in Utah. So we have a huge diversity of bumblebee species. And this is a picture on the left of a bumblebee colony that we have reared out in our lab. We use these colonies to study the behavior of bumblebees. And they have this really interesting life cycle where they nest in the ground. And then in the spring, the gines, the female queen bees, emerge out and go forage and start making their colony and look for a place to have their nest. And they do that throughout the summer, and in the late summer and fall, they make new gines. Those gines go and find places, and they overwinter, just the new queen bee. And so this is also why it's important to have bare ground. because these bumblebees are looking for nesting spots. And so when you're thinking about creating your habitat, your pollinator habitat, think about including this bare ground into your habitat. So the bees, and actually most bees are ground nesters. More than 70% of the bee species in the US and in Utah are ground nesters. And so they need those nesting habitats too. Bumblebees are also great because they do something called buzz pollination. And so they can actually vibrate their wings to get up to a frequency that many other bees cannot do. And this is really good for those solanaceous crops such as tomatoes and potatoes that need that buzz pollination to get adequately pollinated. So if you have other plants that the bumblebees like, as well as your vegetable crops, it will just create a more stable environment for these bees to nest. Additionally, the squash bee, this is Peponapsis. We only have one species in Utah, Peponapsis prenosa. They are incredible hosts on squash. They pretty much only pollinate squash. But if you plant squash, these bees will come to them. They are also ground nesters. This is an image of their nest. They dig down, they collect their provision mass, which is a mixture of pollen and nectar, and then they lay their eggs, and their babies, their offspring, develop completely underground until the next spring, early summer, late spring, when they emerge to do the life cycle all over again. And then there's mason bees, Osmia. These are cavity nesting bees. So 30% of bee species are cavity nesting bees. And Osmia is a really great pollinator of fruit crops, as well as many rosaceous plants in the environment. And they are solitary bees. So bumblebees and honeybees are social bees. Peponapsis and Osmia are solitary bees, which means there's only one female doing the work. She doesn't have a colony or a hive to depend on. It's just her. And she lays, if you can see that cavity across the middle there, she collects a bunch of pollen and nectar, puts it in her provision, and lays their eggs, and those eggs develop. They're called mason bees because they partition their nests with mud, and that's how she keeps her offspring safe. And they also develop over winter in cocoons, and then they emerge in the spring. And I said that they're really great pollinators of orchard crops. 2 mason bees can do the same amount of pollination as 100 honeybees. And so mason bees are used commercially in orchard crops, and we usually recommend 400 mason bees to 2 honeybee hives, which can be upwards of 100,000 honeybees. 400 mason bees are doing the work of 2 honeybee colonies. There are 86 native mason bees in Utah, so it's a hugely diverse group. And if you have rosaceous plants, period, doesn't have to be an orchard tree, they will go and collect them, and you will probably have them in your garden. Then there's also leafcutter bees. There is also a huge diversity of leafcutter bees in Utah. There's 67 species of leafcutter bees. They are called leafcutter bees because they make their cell partitions out of leaves. So they cut leaves, wrap them up. And so one of the things you should think about when providing habitat for bees is that many species don't just need pollen and nectar. They also need other biotic material like mud or leaves to make their nests and complete their life cycle. And they're also cavity nesting bees. They also collect pollen and nectar and put it into a provision mass and have a similar life cycle as Osmia. They're also closely related. There is a non-native leafcutter bee, Megachile rotundata. This is the alfalfa leaf cutting bee. It is used primarily to pollinate commercial alfalfa seed, but it is also not native. It is introduced into the United States and used commercially for alfalfa. You can buy this for your backyard. I would not recommend buying it unless you needed to pollinate alfalfa. There are many other native species of leafcutter bees that are just as adorable as this species. Okay, so are bees in decline? Yes and no. So this is actually a pretty outdated study now, but in 2013, there was a study looking at whether or not bees are in decline, and there was a mixed bag. 30% of the bees were declining, 30% of the species were increasing, and 40% of the bees, we were like, what's going on here? Or they were remaining stable. But the biggest thing that came away from this was we don't have enough data to be able to decide who is declining and who is not. There was another study that was done in the Mid-Atlantic region in the US, looking at the introduction of non-native species and if they were outcompeting native species. And what they found is that, yes, native species were declining and non-native species were increasing. And that was concluded to those non-native, and this was mason bees, non-native mason bees, were outcompeting native species of mason bees. And so there's a whole different reasons why bees are declining, including introduced species, habitat loss, pesticides, pests and pathogens, and of course, anthropogenic stressors like warming temperatures and drought are all adding and amplifying to these other stressors. So you guys are doing a great job and taking the first step to reducing that habitat loss by putting some of it back. So thank you for doing that. And what can you do to help? Well, hopefully you guys are already going to do this, but plant flowers, plant native flowers, plant flowers that will bloom in all different seasons, early spring to late fall. And I've seen the plant list for here, and these are great. It's great to have a diversity of plants. But I just wanted to briefly touch on some really new research that's coming out of Oregon State University looking at native bees versus honeybee resources. And they were doing some cool research where they added lavender, a non-native plant, to their garden of native plants to try to trap the honeybees to just go to the lavender. And what they found was that adding lavender acted as a deterrent or acted as an attractant to honeybees. So the honeybees were only going to the lavender while the native plants, those resources were available for the native bees to go to. And so I actually tried this in my garden when I found out about it. And I can anecdotally say that it is working in my garden as well. We have a big lavender bush and the rest of our front yard is native plants. And what I have noticed is that the honeybees are going to the lavender and not the other native plants. So this is kind of a really cool way to have this niche partitioning of resources. So you don't, and it's just inevitable here in Utah that we're going to have honeybees flying in our yards. So maybe consider adding a lavender bush. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about today was bee hotels and how to make a bee hotel properly and what they are and should you have them. So the biggest thing when it comes to bee hotels is having material that you're able to clean or replace. So the simpler is the better, is better too. So they need to be long enough. Ideally 6 inches is the right length, and then varying diameters from 3 to 12 millimeters long. And the more hole sizes you put out, the more bees that you're going to attract. So cavity nesting bees can be really picky about what holes and where they're getting placed. So having a variety of different holes are going to attract a variety of different species. When you put them in, like, make sure they're in an appropriate location so that you have resources available to them. Typically, we recommend putting these blocks southeast so the morning sun warms them up, but it's not too hot later in the day. Having some level of shade is a good thing. Space between the holes, like where they are. So if you look at this blue corrugated box, there's space underneath this. We're not really sure why this is, but it does encourage more nesting. Breathable material. So this can be anything like paper straws, wood blocks, Phragmites reeds. Don't use 3D printed material or bamboo. Bamboo has is usually treated for pesticides, and so it has pesticide residue in there, and that's why we say don't use that. And if you're going to use paper straws, wax coated paper is not the greatest thing for them. So uncoated paper is better so they can breathe. Nesting material can be a whole range of things, but the biggest thing to look out for is making sure that they are easily cleanable. And so like wood laminates that open up, that you can clean them out, paper straws that you can twist out are the best mechanism, because if you're not cleaning the bees, if you're not cleaning your bee homes, you're actually doing more harm than good. You're harboring pests, you're creating more pathogen transfer. And so in nature, you wouldn't see this aggregation of bees to different straws, but they are opportunistic. And so if there's a resource available, they will use it. Most of the time, these holes are really spread out in nature. So if you're going to have a bee hotel, it's really important that you're responsible with it and that you clean them out. And I have material that I can give to Liz that can be distributed to you all about how proper maintenance of bee hotels, if people are interested in that. We want to make sure the backs are always plugged. Having open backs introduces pests and parasites. Not having gaps, it's the same thing. And that you have if you're using wood blocks, that they're not right on the edge. And all of these are to prevent parasitism. Okay, so these are a couple bee hotels that I've seen that I cringe at. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about why these won't work. So this big structure in the upper right, this is just way too big. So aggregating all of these bees together, you're going to get so much more pathogen spreading and pests and parasites spreading. And so keeping it smaller is better than having this gigantic wall. It's also would be really hard to clean and do this correctly. Below that is a house that I see frequently sold on Amazon, and it is way too small. Pine cones don't really add anything. You can't clean it. They're using bamboo reeds. Everything is wrong with this. Please don't buy it. Don't waste your money on it. This other picture is a picture that I found at Smith's a couple years ago. They were selling this bee hotel, but it has like holes in the front, and then you open it up and it's completely empty. So it's completely useless. Don't buy that. Don't waste your money on that. And then the last picture with the snail shell on it, the Phragmites reeds on top of that, those are good. Those can be used. The decorative holes in the rolling pin and the wood block can't be cleaned. It looks cute, but don't do that. The other thing is it's a metal roof. That's just going to heat up the bees and it will actually kill the larva. So don't do that. Additionally, while honeybees need water, Native bees get all of their hydration from the nectar in their plants. So providing bees more nectar-rich plants is way better than having water supplies. If you are so compelled to have water for honeybees, a dish with rocks or a sponge works way better than a bird bath. A bird bath is just going to kill them and drown them. And it's going to kill and drown all bees. We have things called pan traps. That is essentially a smaller version of a bird bath, and it's how we collect and kill bees. So don't do that. Okay. These are some recommendations that if you want to learn more about bees in the area, to reach out. If you want to learn more about bee hotels, the Orchard Bee Association has some really great resources. If you want to just generally document the bees in your area, the Bumblebee Watch and iNaturalist are a really great resource for that. And I think with that, I think I probably took up way more time than Liz wanted me to. But.
It was a really great presentation though. So I learned a ton and that was really fascinating. I really appreciate it. I will say before we do a little quick Q&A that if you're new, it looks like we got quite a few people coming in after the presentation had started. So 2 just housekeeping things. If you need to, if you have a question for Lindsie, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. There's no open chat. Q&A can be found in the 9 little dots in the far right-hand corner of your screen. And then if you are wondering about missing the first half of the presentation, this is recorded and we will be posting it to our YouTube channel. And of course, I will send out a link to that when that is up and running. But Lindsie, we got quite a few questions for you. Can I read you some questions?
Yes, I'm happy to answer them.
And then if these questions are questions about the program in general and not for Lindsie specifically, I will get to them at the end of my presentation. And so let me see. Oh, we have a lot. Let me do it this way. So, yes, slides will be shared after the presentation. So what resource do you recommend personally for bee identification?
Oh, so I guess it depends on how specific you want to be. But the Bees in the Backyard is a really good entry to bee identification. So that's by Joe Wilson and Olivia Messenger. That's a really great book. If you want more of a field guide, the Western Bees of North America that I had at the end of my slide, also a really great book by the same authors. I really like that one as a field guide. Discover Life has a really great online key. It can be more challenging if you're not familiar with like structures of bees. And there's also a exotic bee ID key that USU hosts, but it also has native species in there to ID. So that could be another resource.
Okay, so next one is, what is iNaturalist? Is it only for iPhone or for Android also? And I can answer that part. It is online as well. It's for Android and iPhone, and you can download the app. But if you want to
use it on your computer,
yes, do it on the computer. It's a lot easier than your phone.
It's basically a crowdsourcing platform for occurrence records of all groups. So it's not just for bees. It does plants and mammals and birds and everything in between. It's a really, if you haven't ever played with it, it's really fun. Seek, if you have the app Seek, iNaturalist and Seek are partner platforms. So Seek is just like the AI version, the like machine learning version of iNaturalist. iNaturalist is more crowdsourced, where people go and take pictures and upload it, and then experts can go in and identify it. And it's really become a really great tool and resource, and has caught on a lot of popularity. And so many researchers I know and myself have used it to answer ecological questions. So it's really been amazing.
Are there native species that you can keep in a beekeeping type scenario?
Yes. So Ospeolignaria is a great example of that. So you can ranch Lignaria. They're native through most of Utah, and you can like put up a bee home and keep them and watch them, and they'll. I have some in my backyard, and you just sit there and watch them, and they'll create their little nests, and they only fly during the spring. The rest of the time they're in, they're as immatures overwintering or developing. And those are some of the resources that I'll give Liz, and she can hand them out. But if you have more specific questions about that, the Orchard Bee Association is a really great place to start.
And then the question from Nikki, bare ground for bees, is mulch okay? Does it need to be just dirt? And I will probably answer this one later, but I would say too much heavy mulch is not good for those bees. And so if you can't unmulch all of it, I do know if you have a partnership with a landscape incentive program, they usually require a certain thickness of mulch. And so what I tell people is pick a spot and leave it bare. If you have to have a certain amount of mulch elsewhere, or pick a specific material to mulch with. For example, I'm building a demonstration garden out here at the government center, and that is mulched with compost. And so they can still get through that to the ground because it's a very fine compost. So it's not no mulch, but if you want to support the ground nesting bees, you will need to have some bare ground somewhere that doesn't have thick, heavy bark mulch on it.
Yeah, and we also did the landscape incentive program, and we worked with the coordinator there. And we're like, we want to make sure that it's bee friendly, and they were very amenable to me being like, can I not mulch this part? And they said yes. And so communication is key, but yes, having that bare ground, it can be really important to promote a healthy diversity.
When should we? Let me see. Do solitary bees actually use human-made bee boxes?
Yes and no. Yes, if they are done properly. No, for 90% of the bee boxes that you can buy commercially. There is some resources out there about like EcoBob certified. So the Orchard Bee Association, which is a nonprofit that does a lot of this cavity nesting bee research. They have an EcoBob certification, and they have a list of vendors that have met the standards to sustainably produce or raise cavity nesting bees. And so that's where I would go to look at those resources. But don't buy them from Amazon. You're going to waste your money.
And then I had two different questions regarding bird baths. So just no bird baths then was one question. And the other one is, if we have a bird bath, should we place it away from our native plant area and our bee hotels?
This is really tough. And I don't know the research from the bird side, but I feel like there was research that came out recently saying that bird baths weren't beneficial for birds, and they're definitely not beneficial for bees. I would say no bird bath, but that's your decision to make.
Yep. I have one, and it's in a corner, like a super shady corner of the yard, and I do get doves, and I don't get anything else. And they're still mostly native. And then somebody said, let me see if I can find this, and then we might start moving on. It was a question about the lavender. Okay, why do we want to contain the honeybees to only one plant, such as lavender? Are they aggressive to other bees? And then as a tag along, somebody else asked, is there a specific kind of lavender you recommend over another? Two-part question.
I'll answer the latter question first. The species of lavender that they tested it on was English lavender. So I don't know about anything, and this is really new research. But Honeybees can sometimes be bullies. There's some research to suggest that they can be bullies and utilize resources that would not be available to native species. It's kind of a mixed bag right now, but the bigger thing is that honeybees are very generalist species, and so they'll go to a lot of different resources. And a lot of these other bees are specialized in certain groups. And so if a honeybee is going to all of these different plants and using up the resources, that specialist bee that may be really specialized on one plant is not going to have the resources that are available. And, you know, this program is supporting native bees. And so that's why I said that.
Yep. And then, can you share advice on resources on how to, oh wait, that's not for you. Bees that nest in the ground need wet or dry ground?
This is a great question. Dry soil is really important. So wet soil facilitates fungal and pathogen growth. So dry soil, and this is actually why the leading hypotheses on why the most diversity of bees occurs in the Southwest is because of that dry soil.
And then McKenna asks, is it true that bee boxes end up just providing a buffet to predators, and you should provide multiple spots to nest in so that predators do not congregate in an area?
Yes. Yes. Most of that is true. And that's why like keeping them small is much better than these massive bee hotels. And you are aggregating species that don't normally aggregate in nature. So if you keep it small enough, it's not really going to like increase your predator population. And I have never, most of the predators that I have issues with are other insect predators, not like bird or squirrel predators, but that does happen occasionally.
And then Sarah Jo asks, is there research on the nutritional value for pollinators of native plants versus noxious weeds or non-native plants?
Yeah, I'm not doing any of that research, but there is currently work going on to understand nutritional benefits and how different species need different nutrients. And I think the current understanding right now is that generally native species of plants provide more nutrients or the right nutrients to native bees, but that's not like a definitive thing. So that's still actively being researched.
Okay, I think that was the majority of them. If you asked a question and we didn't get to it, I'm sorry. We will try, and I will send your questions to Lindsie later, and I will send out a follow-up email when we're all done with the recording, a link to the recording, a link to any resources we talked about today, and then I'll send a list of questions to Lindsie too, and she can answer your questions if you didn't get to them today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and good luck. I'm so excited for you guys. Ours was an adventure. Yours is too.
And thanks so much, Lindsie. We really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for being here with us.
Yes.
All right, everybody, I'm going to move on with the next portion. See ya. Okay, let me see here. I'm going to get back into this. And all right, can everybody see that? Looks like it. Okay, so back to, I started back on my main screen. So, okay, and then we did agenda already. Sorry, I'm starting on the old screen, and that was Lindsie again. If you didn't know, she was a research PhD at the USDA Bee Lab located in Logan and has been a previous recipient of the award herself. So very familiar with our program. Okay, so let's talk about the origins of the Utah Pollinator Habitat Program. So this was created in 2021 by the state legislature. They passed HB 224, and it was created as a pilot program in the state of Utah. It's very unique. We are one of the only states doing very specific pollinator habitat creation here that is funded completely by the state. It ran for 3 straight years. As a pilot program, offering $70K into this program each year for 3 straight years. And it was dedicated to public education and outreach, distribute as many pollinator-friendly native seeds and plants. Specifically, if you actually read the legislation, we are very specifically limited to native-only plants. So sometimes I get questions like, hey, Russian sage is super great. Why don't you put that in your kits? Well, it's Russian and we can't do that. So that's why it's not in our kits. We are very specifically interested in native insects and their connection to our native plants and getting more of those native plants back out on the landscape for all the reasons that Lindsie just mentioned in her presentation. The grant program shows a 25% cost from myself, and then we show a 75% cost from you, the grantee. And so what that means is we show that I provide a cost in the plants and the growing. We collect the seed, we grow the plants out, we pay an organization to grow those plants out for us. We pick those plants up, we get them to the distribution sites, and we call everything and make sure your plants are picked and packed exactly the way they are supposed to be to you. That is our 25%. And then we say that you guys provide 75%. You put in labor, you put in time. Some of you are putting in new irrigation systems. Some folks are ripping out their lawn. We show this as your 75%, and we will send out an economic interest investment cost assessment at the end of your first full year. If you are a returning awardee, and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I haven't got an email yet. When am I supposed to do my reporting? Your economic interest survey will come with your first year of How Did Your Garden Do, which is going to be around the end of August this year. We want to see you go through a whole full year before we ask you questions. And part of that is too, especially with the economic interest, is that we show you're probably not going to do all your work right now at this very minute. We anticipate that you will probably do quite a bit of work through this next coming summer as well. And so we want to know how much you think you spent overall. And we do report that as a matching contribution on your end to the legislation. So in 2023, there was, because we would have sunset as a pilot and we were not continued funding, we were given one more year of $70,000 to complete that program while they deliberated at the legislative level. And so we were funded through 2025. And then in 2025, in the legislative session that year, we were granted ongoing continuous funding. This program is not grant funded. It is not based on a grant cycle. It is 100% funded year round in perpetuity for now. And so we should not lose any funding. This is very exciting. There's a lot of concern that we wouldn't continue, but as of July 1st, 2025, this program got ongoing funding forever. So very exciting. And so what we're looking at moving forward is continuing this grant program and hopefully expanding it. Statewide effort to collaborate with other partners on pollinator outlooks. We are hopeful that we can expand the grant, I just mentioned that, but also to potentially like larger landholders and stakeholders, not just individuals. And then program collaborations, we're working on things like pollinator pursuit. We collaborate with Utah State University on research, and we're really excited to push the envelope a little bit further. Oops, I moved the screen. Okay, so our program summary and goals. So it's meant to be this is the sign, by the way. We had a lot of questions about the Utah Pollinator Habitat sign. I did get a little bit of a refresh update this year, but the artwork on the back is the same. The sign is 7 by 7. And when we send out your survey about when you would like to pick up your at your pickup location, we'll also ask you if you want a sign or not. Okay, so statewide effort to improve pollinator outlook and boost pollinator populations with a commitment to establish and enhance quality habitat. So when we build your kits, we're looking at bloom time. It's been specially curated for you in the county that you reside in, that you will be putting this project in as to blooming starting as early as we can, usually April or May, and blooming all the way through continues. Some kind of flower is blooming all the way through continuously till the end of October. So you get a full flush that's aesthetically pleasing for you as the homeowner or the yard maintenance person, and then it's also really great for your native bees and your native butterflies for that continuation of habitat, a buffet. The goal over 3 years was to put 90,000 plus native plants and about 18 million seeds in the ground. We do have a bit of a seed program on the site, and we were able to achieve that at the end of year 3. So we're moving into year 5 this year. It's pretty exciting. We're just moving up in numbers. We offer 2 different kinds of kits, which you guys would have seen on the application, these wetland and upland habitat specific plants. And then we have specific plants for northern Utah and southern Utah. And then to increase those native plant availability statewide. And then we offer these ready to plant regionally appropriate habitat kits and seed mixes. Regionally appropriate means if you live in Summit County and you're at a specific elevation, you definitely won't get the same kit as if you live in Joab and you're not at elevation or a significant elevation. We make sure that based on your location of the project that you get the plants that are going to thrive and have the best chance of success in your area. And just a bit of our statistics. So this is current year. So we were funded starting in 2021, but we ran our first grant period in 2022. And these numbers include last year. So over the course of the last several years, we had over 1,654 applicants, 1,062 awardees, and mostly in upland kits. We had 218,000 plants grown out through last year. 78 total acres converted into pollinator habitat. And so those may be acres that are being refurbished or acres that were just grass. We have some breakdown statistics, but overall this was not existing habitat that was made over. And then we also calculate water savings just because we find that there's quite a bit of interest in that. So based on lawn removal applications that we have and removal of pop-ups or rotary heads into drip systems, using calculations that are coming out of the Utah Division of Water Resources, we estimate that we're saving up through 2025, we're saving 56,322,000 gallons of water annually each year because of our converted habitat. Okay, so why are we specifically focused on natives? Okay, well, I will tell you. So these particular natives are locally adapted plant species that support native and animal pollinators. Animal pollinators would be things like bats and sometimes even mice, and then also, but mice aren't in every habitat. Don't worry, there's not going to be mice in your yard. So, but they can be a pollinator. And then also, of course, everybody's favorite hummingbirds. The native pollinators are vital to the health and stability of every terrestrial ecosystem in the world. Other wildlife species rely on pollinators in many indirect and direct ways, just like Lindsie mentioned in her presentation. One of the examples she mentioned was dairy. Dairy is affected by pollinators because the alfalfa that farmers grow to feed, specifically alfalfa is a very nitrogen heavy crop, a very protein heavy crop. Protein and nitrogen drive dairy production. And so alfalfa is primarily fed to dairy cattle. And so without high production, high protein foods, we produce less dairy, and dairy becomes harder to get your hands on if we don't have pollinators that can help produce that alfalfa. And then insect pollinators are facing declines globally through several different ways, but loss of habitat is the largest. Pesticides is a close second. Competition and invasive species. And those are the main things. And so as a program, we can't really do too much with pesticides and competition, but what we can do is we can address loss of habitat. And so what we do is recreate these prairie pockets in your yard where grass or maybe non-native species weren't completely feeding the insects as they needed to stop along their way. And so this program can help with that. And then native bees can be outcompeted by introduced honeybees. That is, there is quite a bit of research on that. It's not necessarily that they are super aggressive, but it's more that the competition is a major factor. Okay. So why focus on native plants? Again, I'll send out a list of resources, but if you haven't checked it out yet, Doug Tallamy is a doctor out of the University of Delaware, I believe, and he wrote a book called Bringing Nature Home. And it's a really fascinating book, and he's talking about what happens if we lose the majority of our insect species and what that looks like for us as a human species moving forward, crop-wise, environment-wise, ecosystem-wise. And it's a really eye-opening book. And his follow-up book was called Nature's Best Hope, and it is absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't read that, he talks about what you can do in your own yard to in your own spaces to increase pollinator habitat and further along insect species here in your own small spaces, what you can do as a homeowner to help. And we were lucky enough to partner with Doug Tallamy and then Friends of Monarchs Utah as a 501c3 that's located here in Utah. And they together in 2024, Doug Tallamy spoke to our group. And we have that link to his presentation. It's about an hour long up on our website. If you link into our YouTube page from the Utah Department of Ag website, you can go view his whole speech, and I highly recommend it. It's about exactly an hour, and it's very fascinating. Okay, so congratulations on your Plant Kit Award. You guys did it. We had crazy numbers this year, so let's talk about the 2026. Okay, our nursery this year that we were using is the State of Utah Correctional Facility. They grow out the majority of our plants, not everything, but they're our primary this year. So this is what it looks like this year. 26 of 29 counties were awarded kits. 2026 plant kit requests. This is our largest year ever. We received 1,077 applicants. So if you made your way through, you can see what a big change that is. We went from in previous years funding periods to being able to fund about 75 to 85% of applicants to this year being under 50, so it made it a lot harder to get through the application cycle. So congratulations for everybody who made it. We had outside of that 1,000 plus applicants, 423 are awarded. That means 2,631 upland kits, so about 84,000 plants. 50 wetland kits. Our numbers went down this year, 1,750 plants. And then that means we're growing out about 85,000 native plants. And then most are in 10-inch grow tubes. And we will show you some photos of that as well, but you can kind of see what those plugs look like in this picture here. So those are our numbers this year. Pretty exciting, big program. And then we grow them out of these plugs. We do have a lot of questions about why plugs and why not larger containers. The plugs do make it a little difficult to get your plants out. I also, on our YouTube video, we have a short up that you can go watch. It's exactly 90 seconds long, and it shows you how to roll the tubes and extract the plants out of the tubes. Also highly recommend you watch that 1-minute video before you pick up your plants at any time today. But we use those, even though they're more difficult, for 2 different reasons. I can fit 98 plants in a flat. So as you might imagine, shipping makes it much easier versus like a 4-inch container. I can only fit 18 plants in a flat. And when shipping container surface is really limited, being able to do 100 plants in a flat versus 18, it makes an enormous difference about how many plants we can move and how fast we can move them. It also helps us pick and sort. And when we're doing 85,000 plants in under a month, it's a lot to try and move around. Gallons are large, and also things like 4-inch pots and gallon pots are a lot more difficult for us to just move physically. It's way more moving, and it's also harder for you as the awardee to pick up. Most people can fit a kit award between 3 to 6 in their own personal vehicle just fine. Larger kits may need a little bit more help. That is another question I have, so make note. If you have a kit larger than 6 and you have a smaller car, you may want to rent or make multiple trips, hopefully if you're close to a pickup location. Okay, what will a successful project look like? So we have at least 3 to 5 plant species blooming at once throughout a growing season. They were curated for you guys specifically through the USU team that put that together a couple of years ago. Some plants come and go just based on our seed availability, but at any one given time, you should never be completely out of bloom in a space. We try to have increased diversity of pollinators. So we hope that you are looking at the bees coming through your yard, the butterflies coming through your yard, the moths coming through your yard. This is what we're encouraging, and I highly recommend you join iNaturalist and get into a Utah group. Pollinator Pursuits has an excellent group that they keep up on here, the Utah Pollinator Pursuits, and you can join it on iNaturalist. We want bees of all sizes, bumblebees, carpenter bees, tiny little sweat bees. We want to see them. Some are smaller than an ant. Hoverflies, they're another great pollinator. They are often called bee mimics as well. They're a type of fly that looks like a bee. They're solitary and they lay singular eggs, and their maggot larvae, because they are a fly, are predatory and they eat aphids. And so it looks like a caterpillar crawling along your plant, but it's actually killing your aphids off. They're really fascinating beneficials. And then the adults are pollinators, beauty all around. Butterflies are always great to have. Hummingbirds are especially wonderful. They're always in there. Moths are huge pollinators. Moths and moth larvae make up the foundation of the food web. So moths and moth larvae are called by Doug Tallamy, I have heard the term, the meat and potatoes of the ecosystem. And so if you have lots of moths, and sometimes their larvae can be destructive, but remember they're native. So tomato hornworms, sod webworm, cutworms, those kinds of things, they can be a little destructive, but if you can satisfy yourself with some of the damage, you are really providing birds with some really foundational food for their young. Wasps, many wasps are native, and we encourage them in our garden. Sand wasps are really cool. They're excellent pollinators. Of course, we have non-native wasps like the European paper wasps, and they can be pesky. And so you manage your property how you want to, but I encourage everyone to keep in mind that it's really impossible to spray for one insect and not another. And a healthy ecosystem looks like everybody working in harmony. And so an unbalanced yard may have a wasp problem, but the more beneficial insects, bees, hoverflies, hummingbirds, birds looking for the larvae that you have in your yard, the less issue you may have with wasps. That was a question we had earlier from Lindsie with, I have a wasp problem, how do I handle it? And I would say creating a more diverse, biodiverse ecosystem is going to help you equalize that. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen eventually. Plants best suited to the site should reseed and grow each season. So even if you put in a drip system and you're going to plant every single plant along your drip system line, the plants themselves will reseed and they will find that water and they'll come up where they're going to be. They know the areas that they like, whether it's a little bit dry or a little bit wet. Don't be discouraged if you have a plant that comes up, blooms, reseeds itself, and then dies right away, because it could be that the plant might be a little finicky. And as long as it went to seed, the plant will come back, just maybe not where you put it, and you will have more at some point. And it will pick out where it wants to be on its own if it didn't like the space you made for it. Other animals such as birds prey on and attack pollinators. I know it's kind of sad sometimes to watch a bird nip a monarch out of the air and eat it or something like that, but you'll have to remember that that is part of why we're building these ecosystems. It's not just for the insects, it's also for the food web that we provide that habitat for. And so is what it is. Patience with native plants is a virtue. So like I said, sometimes they're really small to get started. That's okay. They may stay small for a couple of years and then all of a sudden they'll just explode onto the scene and get huge. And that is normal. If you're in the horticultural world at all, or you've been a gardener, you may have heard the phrase like first year they sleep or creep. Yeah, first year they sleep, second year they leap, third year they leap. And so sleep, creep, leap. It's because that first year they may not do much, but what the plant is doing that you don't really see is that they're establishing their root system and figuring out where they want to be. Second year they creep, they're building that root system under the ground. The top may not look like much, but I promise you it's doing something. And then in the third year they leap. And so you may see that explosive growth in that third year. We do have some shrubs in our kits, fern bush and cliff rose are two that we put out every year, and they will be in the kits again this year. And cliff rose in particular is a a sleeper and a creeper. It won't do much. It's quite small when it will come to you. And in that third year, I promise it'll be really large. So just patience. Results may take years. A true herbaceous garden bed is not considered fully established until the completion of year 3. So when you're headed into your 4th season, so if you're awarded in 2026 and putting it in, it will be the September of 2010 that your garden should be fully established. So just something to keep in mind. And then beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes we have people that feel like native plants aren't always the most expressive, particularly in the first year that they're planted. But don't worry, they'll grow up, it will be fine, and your native insects love what you're doing for them. Hey, so site preparation and maintenance, a lot of questions on this one. So hopefully some weed control, reduction of plant competition has already taken place. We are T-minus 6 weeks out from most distribution sites, 10 weeks out if you're in the last distribution site, which we'll get to here at the closer to the end of the presentation. So if you haven't already started removing sod, if that was part of your plan, or reducing weed coverage in an area, I highly recommend that you start making headway in that area. We ask that you install your plants from us within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving them. And that is because they're in tiny, little tiny pots. And so if they sit on your back porch in the sun and the heat, because we try to aim for September and it should be cooler, but you know, based on the way it's going, it may have temps in the 100 degrees. If you're not actively watching those plants, what we really don't want to do is give them to you and have them die on your back porch, or crisp up, and then they're being transplanted and trying to come back all at once is a lot of shock for a little tiny plant. So we ask that you have all your plants in within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving them. So if you haven't started on your planting plan and you don't already have an existing space where your plants will go, they can't really wait for you to finish that by the time you get to them. They can wait a little bit, but not much. Avoid use of pre-emergence and pesticides. So if you don't know, a pre-emergent is a type of herbicide that you put down typically in the spring, but they can go down really any time, and they block germination of seeds. And the reason we say avoid pre-emergence is because part of what we're doing here, these plants that are given to you, they're not sterile. The seed is wild harvested, wild collected, and grown out from wild seed. They will reseed themselves. And that is, as a program, what we're looking for. We want them to reseed themselves in your yard. And so if you're using pre-emergence as a weed blocker, it's also, they're not selective. So it will also block your penstemon seeds coming back, your glove mallow seeds coming back, and you limit your reseeding capabilities if you put down a pre-emergent. Pre-emergents are considered a pesticide. So pesticides also are a blanket term that covers all sides. Herbicides are pesticides, insecticides are pesticides, fungicides are pesticides. If you can avoid using any type of pesticide, herbicide, insecticides specifically, very much so, please avoid using them. If you're not familiar with IPM or integrated pest management, there's a lot of really great sources on the USU website about what that is and how to use it, but it's basically a pest threshold. You don't treat unless you see something that's like completely unmanageable. And so highly recommend you look at that. If you have a noxious weed program, things like bindweed is another one. We get a ton of questions about bindweed. You can use, really the only way for control on that is going to be some type of herbicide. Hand control is, mechanical control is really not going to be super successful in that way. And so just to touch on the bindweed question that we get all the time, particularly if you're in a small space, something that you can do is take your herbicide of choice, follow the label, use the proper PPE, and you put it in a Ziploc bag or a condiment container, and then you take the whole top of the vine and stick it in that Ziploc bag and then zip it up so that everything is contained in the Ziploc bag, and then that plant can suck that up and take it down into their root system, and you're not hitting any plants around you with additional overspray or accidentally hitting any insects. So highly recommend the baggie method if that's been a problem for you. Beware of neonicotinoids in big box stores. Neonicotinoids are a class of insecticide that is systemic. So, and it is often found in nurseries where they're doing production and they're trying to keep greenhouse insects off their plants so that they look nice before they go to market, and they treat the soil with a systemic neonicotinoid. The plant takes that up and it becomes poisonous, deadly to the insect. And nurseries often use this in the nursery industry to put out really pretty looking plants. And so you guys as awardees, often you're looking for some filler plants, or you want some additional shrubs or trees because we don't offer those. And you may go buy at a nursery. What you don't want to have happen is to draw a whole bunch of insects and beneficials into your yard with your really awesome habitat, and then put a plant that is poison to them somewhere in the middle of that. And so you can ask and inquire at your local nursery if they use neonicotinoids in their production. Many big box stores will label a plant, and it'll say this plant, I think Home Depot does that, it'll say this plant was produced with neonicotinoids, or this plant was produced with no neonicotinoids. So read your label, and if it doesn't say, feel free to call the grower and ask those questions. Avoid use of weed barrier. And so we talked about that a little bit. About 70% of our native bees in the state of Utah are ground nesting bees. And so if we block them with weed barrier, they cannot get into your yard, and you are removing that habitat from them. We do see a lot of people that have noxious and they're worried about that. And we understand you have to do what's best for your yard, but if you can avoid the use of weed barrier, that would be best. Additionally, we're hoping that your plants reseed themselves everywhere, and if you're using a weed barrier, they won't be able to take hold and reseed themselves, and you prevent that from happening as well. 70% of ground nesting. Mulch is better, leaf litter is best. And so somebody earlier asked in Lindsay's presentation, like, what kind of mulch? If you can leave a patch of bare ground. Again, I understand that many landscape incentive programs require a certain inch thickness of mulch, and that's because it helps you with water retention, which is great. Just be very intentional about the type of mulch you use or where you place it. If you can have a strip of bare ground that you're using, that's great. Here at my facility, I use compost, and so it's super fine. And I do see the ground nesting bees, their little homes are really easy to find. I do see that the ground nesting bees are able to get through that and create their little homes, because I can see their exit holes and watch them coming in and out through that compost. It's just a super fine compost material, and I mulch with that instead of using a bark mulch. Figure out your irrigation if you haven't got that way already. Drip is best, but if that's not feasible, hand or leaving your old system in is totally fine. And everything works as long as you, particularly with hand, put it on a schedule. Ideally, your plants that you're getting from us are going to be watered fairly and frequently. I mentioned earlier that I'm establishing a demo garden here at the Taylorsville office building, the state building, and that's up, and it's not as pretty as it could be, but if you guys are interested in ever coming out and looking at it, it is out there and open to the public, and you can always come ask where it is at the front desk if you don't find it right away in the parking lot. It's in the same parking lot as the DMV here in Taylorsville. But you can go out there and check it out, and you can see what that looks like. But I would mention that those beds are being watered once every 30 days right now, and it's doing just fine on its own. Those plants have been established for 2 years, and they're doing all right. And I could probably, even in the 100-degree temps, and I could probably dial it back even further, except they're still not officially established. I do have another planting day where we're going to plug in some more plants next week. And when that happens, I'll bump my watering up to once every 2 weeks to get those plants established. And next year, I'll drop it down to once every 30 days again. So it's not very much. Plants will need gradual tapering off of water. If you overwater once they're established, they can die, particularly Spiralsia or globe mallows. They just will die. They do not want extra water. They want a little bit while they establish, and then they don't want it anymore. The goal is to establish and get a super firm root system and let them go dormant for the winter. So you're going to water more than you would normally. They're not immediately drought tolerant. You're going to disturb the roots. You're going to put them in the ground. It's probably going to be hot in September. If you just throw them in the ground and you don't water at all and say, well, they all died, they're drought tolerant, and you're not going to have a very good success rate. So you need to establish them, get their root system out and growing, and then hopefully by the time winter sets in and they can go dormant, you'll be all set and they'll have a pretty decent root system by then. Realities of native plant establishment: patience, patience, patience. Like I said, they sleep, they creep, and they leap. Third year is your full establishment. You'll see your best and brightest and biggest in your third year, and then all moving forward. Reaching a full equilibrium in your landscape can take years. So I mentioned that a little bit with the wasps. You may have an influx of something that you don't like. And that's true of any garden, whether it's native or not native. You might get aphids all over something and it'll just look like horrible. And you'll say, what was even the point of that? But eventually the ladybugs will find you. Eventually the mantis will find you. For sure, your bee mimic will find you, and they'll lay their larvae and eat your aphids. You just have to be patient. If you go right in with guns blazing and try to kill off whatever it is, then you risk all of your beneficials that are laying eggs on the same plant. So remember, it can take some time, but it'll eventually come to its own. Each site is different. Not all plants will thrive. You guys should expect some mortality. That is just the nature of the game, no matter where you are. So if you have fully clay soils, sometimes things aren't going to love it, versus if you have fully sandy soils. And so some things are going to thrive and take off and then reseed themselves because they were successful there, which is why you don't want to block that germination. And some things aren't just going to wither. And also you will find that some things just don't like a specific location. For example, out here at the demo garden, I've put in 10 Palmer's penstemon. They're super tall pink penstemon, and they thrive in some spots, just get huge and lovely and are getting enormous, and then some of them have just died. And I don't know if that little spot gets too much water or not enough. It just sort of does what it does. And so you put them out. Don't lump them all together. I don't recommend that. And then see what works for you. And then for hopefully where they're happy, they will reseed themselves and you'll have a lot more of them. Some plants may exceed your expectations. They may get really huge. We had an awardee that I'll throw it out there too. Feel free to always send me your plant questions. If you have them, I'm happy to answer those. I had some gentleman email me from last year that said they put in their Hooker's evening primrose and it ate all 7 plants he put around it because it got so big and it flopped and got enormous and he didn't realize. And we'll move on to how you can know how big some plants are going to get than others. So don't give up on your starts. Just because they look dead doesn't mean they are. Some things do die back completely to the ground and take a while to sprout back every year. Doesn't mean they're dead. Don't go dig it up and throw it away because you might have just killed it off. Desert 4 o'clock is a big one that does that. It looks dead until it doesn't. And then you go out there and it's 10 foot across and you had no idea. No signs of rebound next spring. No problem, wait longer. Seasonal variation in blooms means late emergence for some plant varieties. So like I said, we've tried to stagger blooms for you. So that should be something that you watch for. Some won't come up until later because they bloom later. And some will bloom in their first year and some won't. That's also dependent on where you live. Something, if you're in Logan, super cold Cache, Bear Lake, your stuff might not bloom until the 3rd year. If you're in like really hot St. George, it might bloom right away. You just don't know. Warm versus cool season grasses. So they're talking about, in this example, your cool season grasses will probably throw a seed head early, and your warm season grasses may not until its 2nd year, just because it needs to go through a full year cycle and not just one. Okay, so navigating my website, please go to the Pollinator Habitat Program website. I'll also link this in the email that I send out and you feel free to click on it. And on that website, you will see potential species you will be receiving in your habitat kits and how to find info on those plant species. There's also already on there a planting guide and a maintenance guide. There are layout design work. Of course, every yard's going to be different, but you can go see designs that are put together by actual horticultural designers that have worked with our program in the past. They have generously allowed us to publish on our website, and you can see what an existing plant layout might look like for you with plants that are specific to our program. Weed management, there's also some information about how to clean up your weeds. And if you have questions, of course, again, you can always email me. Watering frequencies, it's really hard for us to help you with that because, again, it's not necessarily, it's going to be up to your specific type of irrigation. For example, you'd run drip longer than you'd run a rotary system, and you'd run drip more often in sandy soil than in clay soil. So you can always email me and say, hey, I'm super confused. But when you email me, I need to know what kind of system you have and what your soil profile is. And then additional resources like reading suggestions, a native plant booklet. Huzzah! So you'll get this booklet. It's a full color booklet. This was paid for by a BLM grant. And it has pictures of how to ID each plant, what they need, what they don't need, and then charts about when they bloom, when they don't bloom. You will get one of these in your packet. They're at the printing shop right now. They're really great. If you lose your booklet, they are free at most of the extension areas. Not right now. I think every extension office is empty, but we are ordering more and we're shipping them out, and they should be out there by the end of October. So if you somehow lose your kit from your kit, you'll get one. But if you ever need more, you can always call your local extension office and go pick one up for free. Okay, so these are some plants, not all plants. And I'm not going to go through all of them since we're really running way over what we had initially thought for time. Sorry, guys. But we have wetland kits and upland kits. The upland habitat kit here is specifically not very complete. So you'll have probably an additional 10 species that you may be able to get. All of those will be uploaded online by before pickup for you to be able to go look at specifically species by species. We're adding 3 new upland species this year, so I only need to upload 3 new sheets. But this is what they look like. They have multiple different kinds of milkweed. And then lots of different options there. And each awardee will be given an information packet. So in your packet, all those resources that I just mentioned, like the maintenance guide, the planting guide, all of that, they'll be in your packet. You'll have all of those at your fingertips, plus a booklet. And in your packet, if you order one, because this will be on your survey that I send out soon, will also be your pollinator habitat sign if you want it. They're metal, they're coated in UV resistance. They have a QR code, so people, if you put them out front, people can come by and scan it and see what you did in your yard and how they can become involved too. Okay, so just as another follow-up, the native plant info sheets, this is what they look like. You can download them piece by piece. I've had people do this and put them into booklets for themselves because they wanted these very specific. It's a little more information than just the booklet carries, and all in one page. But you can see that we have the types of wildlife that are supported, specifically the water needs, and then the species inflow, how tall it's going to get, what zones they should be, what the spread is. Watering needs, again, it's a generic recommendation. If you have sandy versus clay soil, it might be a little different for you, but this is the generic recommendation on that. And so those are on our website. And then we, of course, we have the habitat kit maintenance guide and the habitat kit planting guide. So planting guide, we read at planting, and then maintenance guide, you can keep on hand to just check in every now and then and say, what am I doing? And what does that look like? And then, okay, so just other considerations. So you can kind of see here, we have upland kit and they show bloom times and bloom schedule and what that looks like. Create yourself a planting plan. You can draw them out on square foot paper. We also have, of course, those sample plans online if you're interested. But consider these questions as you strategize your space if you don't already have a planting plan. How tall and how wide are your plants going to get? If your plant gets 3 foot tall and 2 foot wide and but has a tendency to flop, you probably don't want to plant stuff too close to it because it's going to get really big and cover those plants up. Bloom times throughout the season in your kit. If you plant everything that blooms all at the same time together, it's going to look kind of weird because they'll go in spikes instead of like one continuous look, unless that's the look you're going for. Depends on you. Will they spread and how far? So that's whether, again, is seed dispersal or rhizomatous. And so rhizomatous means, are there roots spreading and they're going to come up by roots? So a good example of this is showy milkweed. Showy milkweed can spread throughout the garden, and it's rhizomatous. It comes up on roots. So you'll want to take some time to think about what that looks like for you. In terms of where you want to put it in your space. I've seen people contain them. They'll put like a cute like half wine barrel in their yard and plant the milkweed in that so it won't run out of the barrel and they can still have all the benefits of the milkweed in their yard. It's up to you. Map out your planting to maximize your project space. So they say plant for edge effects, so monarchs and others. So research has said that monarchs will prefer milkweed planted on the edge of a bed versus planted into the center of a bed. So just something to think about. And then consider your watering patterns. So maybe planting stuff with lower watering needs with stuff that has maybe a little bit higher watering requirement. And if you have multiple zones, you can control that very easily. Provide access to exposed ground for your nesting bees. So maybe coming up with a place where maybe you don't lay mulch or you come up with some sort of sand design or something like that. And then refer to abundant resources online. There's lots. Utah Pollinator Habitat Program. We also have a Facebook page. So it's super long. If you're not already joined the Utah Pollinator Habitat Program group page, you can go find us online and join the group. And lots of groupies share photos of their successes, photos of their designs, what that looks like in terms of success moving forward for them and things that they failed at that they wish they hadn't done. That's all on there, and feel free to at everyone when you do that. Google and Pinterest have tons of ideas, and you can search for examples of robust perennial gardens for pollinators. I also recommend, if you haven't looked it up yet or you've never heard of it, Google research matrix gardening. It's a really great way to do native gardening in a type of matrix where you have like grasses in a certain spot and smaller perennials, larger perennials, shrubs and or trees. And it's meant to maximize a natural look, like a meadow type scape, and then be really attractive to insects and pollinators. There's an example of this if you're up north here at the Jordan Valley Water Conservation District in West Jordan. They have a matrix garden in their demo area, and you can go look at it and their planting choices there. They also didn't only use natives in there, but you can get an idea. Okay, so this is, again, here's our website again, but this is the example of one of the plans that is on our page. So you can kind of get an idea. There's a key there and what that looks like. And then weed management. So get to know your weeds in every season because sometimes they look different. What they look like when they're tiny versus what they look like when they're in full seed is going to be different for you. Please refer to your planting guide and maintenance for insight on weed management if you have any questions. Okay. So again, if you can, avoid weed barrier. The bees need the bare ground. And so just a hot tip, leaving your flower gardens intact over winter and pruning hollow stems to a height of 6 to 12 inches can further benefit native pollinators by creating access to native habitat. And you can kind of see there, that is looks like a echinacea, which is native to the Midwest. But if you leave your stems up like that through the winter, so you prune off, I'll start over. So this is echinacea, and they have a pithy stem. So they make the perfect nesting habitat for stem nesting or tube nesting bees. And so you prune 6 to 12 inches tall after the flowers have dispersed their seed or are done flowering for the season, which usually for echinacea in particular is the end of July, early August. And then you leave them like this over the winter. And so you prune them in August, just like this, You cut them down, and then the tube nesting bees will find you in August, lay their babies in those tubes, and then in the springtime you leave them up until you see emergence, and it usually looks like a drill has come out. And so, or you can gently knock the stems down if you want to clean out your garden space, and lay them on the ground, and they're still in there and intact, and they'll emerge either way. But just letting them stay creates more habitat. And then you may have heard the term leave the leaves. I understand that people are in HOAs and they have things or neighbors, and they may not be able to leave your entire yard covered in leaf litter. But again, just like bare dirt, if you can only do a patch, you can also maybe patch for a small area of leaf litter. This is where our bumblebees in particular overwinter through the winter, is in large leaf piles like this. And then you just wouldn't bag them up and get rid of them until it's warm enough during the season that they'll be okay. So usually the first week of March. All right. So watering frequencies, we talked a little bit about this. It's going to vary significantly. Again, refer to your plant maintenance guide. Do not overwater these certain species. So penstemons, most of our penstemons do not want overwater. The globe mallow, I can't stress that enough. I had an incident out here in the demo garden where my valve stuck on for a day, and it watered because the solenoid had gone bad, and it killed 2 globe mallows, just dead, like not even attempt to come back. So they don't recover either. If you overwater, there's no recovery on that. You can't just baby them and they'll come back. They're just gone. And then northern sweet vetch, which will be in your kits this year. Plants will be coming from a greenhouse, and they have received regular watering, so wean appropriately. So if you go and plant them all and say they're drought tolerant, they'll be fine. You're not going to have a high life rate on that. So every other day for the first 1 to 2 weeks, spread out over week 3. I'd say every day if you're not on clay soil and we have temps over 100, you'll just have to kind of figure that out. I know this sounds obvious, but sometimes people struggle with it. If your plant is wilting or flagging, it needs more water. So, all right. And then winter watering, you may need winter watering. And in the last couple of winters, they've been really, really dry for us. And so some plants have required a little bit more maintenance than they should, just because they are trying to establish in the winter. So if you can, particularly with evergreen species, and that is because evergreen species are continuing to respirate through the winter, particularly if it's above 40 degrees. They're still respiring and expending water. And if it's bone dry and they're still taking water in and needing water like most evergreens will, they will really struggle in the winter if it's very dry. So if you're not seeing significant rainfall, and I don't mean like a light drizzle, I mean a significant rainfall every week or 2 weeks, and it's above 40 degrees, take a bucket out there and gently water anything that's evergreen. Your plants will thank you for it, and you'll have a much higher success rate. All right, plant pickup locations, we're here. Okay, so this is what it looks like this year. For the northern counties, that's going to be Saturday, September 5th in Logan. And I'll send this all out, and you'll be sent reminders. Don't feel like you have to go crazy with this information right now. But Logan, Saturday, September 15th from 10 to 2, or by appointment Friday evening. I have had this question. People will say, what do you mean by appointment? I'd like to make an appointment. And I would like to say that the appointment comes from us, not you making an appointment. So I'll clarify that. If we are ahead of ourselves with our picking and packing and your kits are done, we will call you and say, hey, it's ready now. It's Thursday night or Friday afternoon. Do you want to come now? Because it alleviates our load rate on Saturday. And so you may not hear from us, and that's because your kit's not done. So you'll just come on Saturday if that's what that looks like for you if you don't hear from us. Okay, so Park City is same time, same day, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Swanner Nature Preserve. And that's going to be at the barn of the Swanner Nature Preserve, not at the Swanner Nature Preserve. If you go to Swanner Nature Preserve, they're going to make you drive down the road. We will send you a Google pin as to where you're supposed to be if you're picking up in Park City. Just make sure you recognize that you're not going to the actual center. And then Roosevelt's a little different. They're going to do Thursday, September 3rd. This year, we have very few people that are in the basin this year that have applied for the program. And so they are doing a Thursday, September 3rd from 4 to 6. And if you can't make that work, you can call them and set aside a different day. And they will be available to you that whole week, as long as your kid's ready and they built it for you. So that one's a little bit different, but 4 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, September 3rd, if you can make it. And it will be at the USDA Service Center in Roosevelt there at the Conservation District Warehouse. Okay. So in Ogden, we have an Ogden Northern Wasatch Front location. That's going to be Saturday, September 12th from 10 to 3. And that's going to be at the Division of Wildlife Resources, the DWR warehouse in South Ogden. Okay, central counties. And so the Bastion Agricultural Center is Salt Lake County, and that's going to be in South Jordan on September 26th. That is our largest pickup location. We are trying to alleviate the amount of people picking up there. And so I am working out right now a possibly new location for Utah County that might be in Orem. I just haven't gotten the final details on that. That may be September 19th, the weekend ahead. I can't guarantee it. It would be in Orem if it is there. And you will find out when I send out the survey. It will be on there or it won't be. If it's not on there, it didn't exist and it didn't work out. If it's on there, you maybe have an Orem location pickup. I hope that works out. Okay. So Southern counties, so Saturday, September 19th and Saturday, September 26th, you have 2 weekends back to back that you will be able to select, and they are both at the same place in Cedar City. It says Cedar City, Washington County. Typically, Washington County folks want to pick up a little bit later than the folks that are up in Iron County because they're just lower down and it's a lot hotter, but you can pick up it on either date. You'll just select which one you'll be at. So they have September 19th and September 26th, and that is at the Museum of Natural History on the SUU campus, and they set up their pickup location. Again, you'll have a pin when I send out your email, but they actually do it on the street corner just outside the museum, and you roll up to the street corner and they'll load your car for you. And then Moab is our last, East Utah there is our last pickup, and that's going to be Saturday, October 3rd. So additional resources. All of these things are on our website as well, and I will also again send this all out. But bees are the best. Joe Wilson is a PhD here at Utah State University, and he also runs the website The Bees in Your Backyard. And his whole job is bee diversity up at USU, and he's really, really knowledgeable and local, and highly recommend. He also presented for us in a webinar in 2023. And so if you go back onto our YouTube website and you watch that first half of a guest presenter in 2023, it's Joe Wilson. It's really interesting, and he also is a photographer and uses all of his beautiful bee photography to really highlight the bee differences. Okay. And so make sure to watch your email and answer the survey questions on where you want to pick up your plants. Your email will be sent, I say the first week of August because that's 2 weeks away. It might even be as early as this week. So maybe Friday. I'm just waiting to hear back on that Orem location. Hopefully very soon. It might even be tomorrow morning. Who knows? But please ensure your emails will not go to a spam box. Your emails from me come from that UDAF, that's pollinator habitat at utah.gov. So if you're not seeing emails, that's where they come from. That's also where this email with the link to this webinar came from today. So questions, and I will say, just in case you have this question, I'll go ahead and answer it right off the bat. If you're wondering about how I can't make that specific date for a pickup location, so you can pick up at any of those locations. So like if you can't pick up at the Salt Lake location on the 26th, you can arrange your location to the Summit County on the 5th and pick up your plants 2 weeks early. And so you just have to pick up the right pickup location. We don't deviate from pickup locations. So if you call me and say, hey, I can't make any of them, just know that we will reabsorb your kit and they'll be redistributed to somebody else. If you don't show up to your pickup location and pick up on the day that you said you would be there, we will redistribute your kit to someone else and it will go back into the pack. It will not wait for you. It won't be at the next distribution center. It does not exist anymore. We don't have extra plants to give away. Our plants that are spare and extra, if they're not reabsorbed right away, do go to rehabilitation efforts around the state for rehabilitation orgs. And so we don't have spare plants to give away. And so with that, I will try to answer some questions for people, and I probably won't get to them all, but feel free to drop off. This is the end of the webinar. You can always email me. My email is lizhamilton, LIZHAMILTON @utah.gov. My email is also on the website, so you can pick it up there if that was too fast. But if you have a question that I don't answer, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to do that. And again, on the Awardee Webinar follow-up email, there will be a list of resources, all the things that we talked about with my contact information as well. So people, Leon has said, maybe we should not do the Q&A. I'll maybe do a few. I'm just gonna scan this and answer. Should mulch be laid before we plant these plants? That's up to you. Most people prefer to wait until after they're done, but also how close your plants are together will determine that for you. What should we do with established non-native plants once we received the native kits? That is also up to you. You do not have to remove them. Like Lindsie said, you know, if you leave a couple of non-native plants, honeybees may be attracted to them, and then you'll have food for honeybees and for native bees. Can we pick up the booklet before the pickup date? So maybe. They're in production right now, and I'm not sure when they'll be to me. I do not have any right now. If you are getting multiple kits, will they all be the same? Yes, your kits are all the same. So if you'll all get 3 kits, each, and all 3 will all be exactly the same. Where you pick up your kits doesn't change what's in them. Your kits are packed for the county that you live in. So like last year, I had somebody pick up in Moab who was really excited to pick up in Moab, even though they lived in Washington County, because they thought they were going to get different plants. It doesn't matter. You're still getting Washington County plants. We pack your order and ship it to that location based on your project county. For drip in a very large area, does every plant need an emitter or a spray emitter ever appropriate? I recommend using pre-perforated drip, not targeted drip. It's up to you. That way you can cover and a whole area weeps all together. So do many of the plants get larger than 4 to 5 feet spread? No, most of them are 1 to 2 foot spread, but there are some that will get that big. Read your kits. Should we expect baby plants to bloom and go to seed this year, or could I wait to take out some of my weed barrier until next year? Some of them will be in bloom when you get them. So you can also collect the seed heads off of them and then store those seed heads in your refrigerator, not your freezer, and then spread them when you're ready. Can you give a general watering schedule? I cannot give you a general watering schedule. I mean, I suggested some, but it's very well based on your soil profile, your exposure, your elevation, all of that. So, you know, it will be drought tolerant eventually, but even then, how often you water is going to be really specific to your site location. You can email me with very specific questions and I'm happy to answer that. When do we stop watering and send them into dormancy this year? Again, it's going to depend on how hot it is. I can't answer that question. If it's 100 degrees in November, you're still watering. Are there any inspiration videos from previous awardees? There is a Modern Gardener episode, which is on PBS, and I will link that in the follow-up email that I send out, and they have tons of footage from prior awardees before and afters, and that's a really cool one. How much water do these plants get every 30 days? If you're talking about my plants in my garden, it waters for 30 minutes every 30 days. And so they get 30 minutes of water. It is on a 0.9 gallon per hour drip line. So not very much. But also it's clay, so it holds water really well. I wouldn't water that less on a sandy soil. Any recommendations on handling dogs around nesting bees? No, I don't. I don't have a dog. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. Where can we find composting material? There are lots of really great orgs around the valley. I, as a government employee, cannot recommend any one place over another. But I will say a compost mix is what I generally purchase, and that's what it is called. Does the baggie method work for English? So talking about herbicide in a baggie work for English and Boston ivy? Yes, it does. It's great. Can you use cardboard as a weed barrier or no? You can. So a lot of people prep their area by doing the lasagna style gardening where they kill off whatever's there ahead of time, and then they lay cardboard, wet it, and lay mulch on top, and you can totally plant into the cardboard because it will break down eventually. I will say I do think it probably blocks ground nesting bees for the first 2 years, though. They won't be able to get through it. So it's a really great way to suppress weeds. It's not so great for your native ground nesters. Do we have a risk of bindweed mites like Colorado? Bindweed mites that only exist to feed on bindweed. So if you have bindweed mites, they're eating your bindweed and they're not touching your other plants. What about doing the baggie method for autumn bindweed mitigation? Yes, absolutely. You can do it all year long. As soon as it pops up, stuff it in a bag. For sleepers, creepers, do we need to intentionally continue to give them space so they don't get smothered? Yes. So I know it kind of looks weird if you have a little tiny 9-inch tall plant that's not doing much and it looks really strange because there's nothing else around it. Patience, patience, patience. Like I said in the awardee, what you don't want to do, like cliff rose is a great example. It's going to take a long time to get to be as big as it wants to be. And so don't plant a whole bunch of stuff around it. Or the alternative is plant a bunch of stuff around it, but understand that you'll eventually have to move it. And native plants don't transplant well. They usually have a really thick taproot on them and they don't want to move once you select the location. Is there any conflict with having bat boxes? No, go for it. Are there any risks for killer bees? I don't know. That's not a risk. Not with our program. What was the name of the Utah iNaturalist group? I believe it's Pollinator Pursuits. Will we get a list of species and a number provided for each kit prior to pickup? Unfortunately, no. And that is because we run into plants will die in the greenhouse. Some of our plants don't love to be in a greenhouse setting and they may not make it. And so I might have you, a good one is the Utah Sweet Vetch. We will have it for you this year. But are you going to get 5 plants or are you going to get 1? It's going to depend on how many make it to the finish line in the next 4 weeks because they do not like to be in the greenhouse and they're dropping like flies in there one at a time right now. So we seed a whole bunch and hope we get a handful by the time it gets to you, which is why we don't make a list. So you will get a list on the day that you pick up for what you have. I can give you a guesstimate if you email me separately, but it's not going to be accurate. And I think what have you learned from the recent survey about the possibility of the plant industry increasing native plant supplies? I'm really hopeful that we can keep moving that forward and that there'll be more and more interest in this. Nationwide, native plant interest in nurseries is like tripled in just the last 2 years. I know I'm pretty good friends with the producers over at Progressive Plants in Copperton, and I know that they are bursting at the seams right now with native plants that they just can't keep on the shelves, that they're producing themselves, and things that they didn't think people would even want is flying off the shelves. So just goes to show that if the interest is there, I think we're generating quite a bit of interest, which is great. How big is a single plant kit? How much space is needed to transport one? A single plant kit is 35 to 30 plants, depending on how many we have in stock. So if you have 3 plant kits, it'll be 1.5 flats worth of plants, and I could do it in my Subaru. So are the plants provided for free? We don't have to cover the cost. No, plants are free. Yep, you come pick them up, they're free for you. We assume the cost on your end is the labor that you put into planting the plants and then maintaining them. If we think we won't be able to fulfill the 3-year commitment, should we withdraw or go forward anyway? So the 3-year commitment is, you may have remembered in your application, we ask that you report for 3 years on your kits. It's okay if you kill everything. We're sad and we didn't want that to happen, but don't feel like you can't report, and don't feel like we don't want you to report. These are the numbers that we need to know. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? You know, did you say you were going to hand water and then nothing survived? Maybe that's something we need to consider, you know, or did you say you were going to put in drip and everything thrived and it was phenomenal, and you know, you had a 100% success rate and everything lived. Like, this is the data that we're analyzing from that, which is also the data that we try to send to the nursery industry to encourage them, incentivize them to put out more native plants. If you don't think you can fulfill the commitment, I think it depends on what that means. Are you just not going to be there for 3 years so you can't report, or are you just, but I don't know. So maybe email me that question separately. What's your specific question on that? Do you have the sign artwork as a sticker? I do. You'll get a sticker in your packet as well. And if you want more stickers, you can always email me and ask for more. Rosemary says, I have a pine tree. Are there concerns about needles making the soil too acidic for native plants? That's actually a garden myth. Pine needles do not make soil acidic. They're at a 6.0 pH, and so they're neutral and do not make your soil more or less acidic. Typically, the reason why plants fizzle out under pine trees is because pine trees are heavily competitive for water. As you've ever tried to dig underneath them, very difficult to get through their root system. And so they kill everything that lives underneath them because they're sucking the water dry out of those plants. Also, there's not a lot of sunlight under trees. And so between not having a lot of water and resources and not having a lot of sunlight, they typically just die. And it's been blamed on acidic needles, but they don't actually do that. So no. Do you have recommended practices for lawn removal? Is it bad to just dig it with a shovel? No. If you can, rent a sod cutter. It's like $300 for 4 hours, and it will make your life way easier. But no, there's no recommended removal. You can let your lawn die and then put cardboard down or wood chips down and see if that works. I've had people kill it off with herbicide, and they kill it off with herbicide and let it die and then cover the whole thing with compost. All of those methods work. We are also allowed to plant non-native plants like Russian sage. Yes. Yep, I'm not the plant police. If you add non-natives into your yard, there's not going to be any penalty for that. How do we make sure our materials aren't spreading Phragmites? Is there a verified source? Like my plant materials, if I'm not exactly sure about that one, there shouldn't be any Phragmites in any of these kits. Can bees dig and live in hard clay soil? They can, and they don't mind it. And ideally, once you start getting a lot of plant cover and you put down some compost or something like that, the clay won't be so hard. Okay, I think that was just a ton of it. Does anybody have any additional questions? Looks like maybe we got a couple extra there at the end. Let me see. So somebody again said, before you end, will you quickly say what size a kit flat is? One kit is 30 to 35 plants, depending on what we end with. So we say 3 kits is the minimum. So if you have 3 kits, you'll get between 90 and 100 plants. Oh, can we fix it if weed barrier has already been laid? Of course, I'm not coming to your house to inspect it. So if you put down weed barrier and you would like to remove it, go ahead. Some of these you have answered already. Yep. Okay, are there resources about compatibility with native trees? I'm not sure about that question either, if you're asking about insects or my kit compatibility. And then can we request the leftover plants after pickup? No, unfortunately. And yes, so should lawns be torn out or can we leave it and integrate plants? I'll just use this as the last question. So lawn should be thought of as an area rug and not as wall-to-wall carpet. And so lots of places do what they call local scaping, and they leave a central open shape for games or chairs or whatever, and lawn cooling, and then they plant all their natives around it, and that's totally fine. Your yard is yours, and if you need to leave lawn, there's nothing in any of our rules saying you can't have it. Lots of people need the yard for kids, for dogs, all those things. If you want to rip it all out, awesome. If you don't, then don't. But just remember whatever you applied in your design. Okay. All right, guys. I think that's the end. So if you have any questions, again, this is recorded. Sorry, this is crazy long. It went for 2 hours. I appreciate everybody's patience. And again, this will be posted and I'll have a follow-up email with all of our resources online. If you have any follow-up questions, again, my email is Liz Hamilton, LIZHAMILTON @utah, spelled out, UTAH.gov. And I will see you soon.